Nothing like a beautiful cup of 100% Kona coffee to get your morning started. Good morning. My name is Matt. I'm one of the guides here at Greenwell Farms. And in honor of the 50th anniversary of the Kona Coffee Cultural Festival, we decided to create for you a virtual coffee tour. And I'm going to take you today seed to cup, how we grow, how we process this beautiful coffee. And if you stay tuned towards the end, I'm going to teach you how to make a perfect cup of coffee. Greenwell Farms is a fifth generation family farm going back to 1850. We've been doing this a long time, and we're going to show you the system that we've built over the years to give you the highest quality 100% Kona coffee. Follow me. So to give you some basics about the Kona Coffee Belt, this little red zone you see on the west side of the Big Island is called the Kona Coffee Belt, and it's roughly 35 miles long as a crow flies, a mile and a half to 2 miles wide at its width, and an elevation about 500 to 3,200 feet. If your coffee grows in that little narrow band, you can sell it as Kona coffee, and if it doesn't, you absolutely cannot. It's driven by what the French would refer to as a terroir. And what that is a combination of geographic characteristics that change the taste of the trees that grow in that region. So we have rainfall in the coffee belt, 70 plus inches. We have average daytime, nighttime, winter, summer temperature shifts of 25 to 30 degrees. You have well-drained, slightly acidic, porous soil. We have afternoon cloud cover that comes over the mountain here almost every single day and gives coffee its much desired canopy effect. It's kind of a UV filter, and all these things together make a large, mild, and naturally sweet coffee fruit. So if you were to take the trees, because we grow Arabica coffee, it's the commonly grown specialty coffee of the world, but if you take it out of that belt and put it anywhere else, it just doesn't taste the same. And I'll leave the good or bad, for you, but it just changes depending on where it grows. Now I want to additionally say that in that Kona Coffee Belt, there are roughly 800-ish small family farms averaging in size from 1, 3, and 5 acres in size. And some of these are generational farms, grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, kids, even grandkids working on the coffee part-time, in some cases full-time, but it's rare these days. And they have other things, and the coffee that they produce largely sold as coffee fruit or coffee cherry to mills. Some people do in-house processing and turn it into finished product. And really at this mill, we support both. We'll buy certified Kona coffee fruit, or we'll help you mill it, give it back to you, and let you sell it at a more value added level. And so everything is possible here in the belt. I do want to mention that inside that Kona Coffee Belt, when you hear 800, you might think that sounds like a lot of farms, but if you were to ask a Colombian how many coffee farms they have, it's going to be something like over 500,000. And so that's not all, that's just coffee, by the way. It's not all the other fun stuff that they grow there. And we're talking about corn and soy and pork, just so we're clear. But yeah, when they hear 1, 3, and 5 acres, they literally, they laugh out loud. They're like, my yard is bigger than that. And it's just the way that Kona developed over time, has these little small family independent farms that used to grow their own food, and over time their cash crop became coffee. The entire state of Hawaii, because all islands do grow coffee now, produces under 1/10 of 1% of the world's coffee supply. So it's a very, very, very tiny amount within the worldwide scheme of coffee. So this is our cupping room, and we have 3 Q graders on this farm: Jennifer Greenwell, Chai Neo, and Patrick Stewart. Pat actually is in Oakland, and he is the guy that brokers our contracts on that side. But Jennifer and Chai lead our quality control team here, and they evaluate coffee here on a variety of parameters: flavor, aroma, body, acidity, finish, linger. They try to pull out individual flavor notes. I don't know if you can see this wheel here, but this is a coffee flavor wheel. And they've, based off of the University of California, Davis created wine wheels. And they can really evaluate on a very serious and actually quite uniform level with other coffee professionals around the world. But they take it very seriously. If you do a formal cupping in this room, of course the door would be closed and they turn on the air conditioner, but you can't have scented shampoo in your hair, you can't put on perfume or lotion. It has to be totally smell neutral as you can get it. and they'll fill out a form like this, and they'll evaluate all sorts of different levels of the coffee. Now, we do this on our private tour, and we have fun with it, but when you do it formally, you can't react. You have to slurp your coffee off a spoon and keep a nice straight poker face, because you don't want to influence the opinions of the people next to you. Sometimes when we're doing a cupping here, we'll have another team cupping the coffee off-site, just so that we can compare charts and make sure there was no environmental factors changing the way we perceive that coffee. So it's a very serious deal. I like to think of this room as kind of the brains of the operation, where they develop those flavor profiles, they try to bring out the best in the coffee, and they're just really dialing it in to the best of their ability. And that's what we do here at the cupping room. This is an aroma chart behind me, so you get really interesting things like clove and maple and cedar, and really weird things like rubber and cooked beef and straw. But you just want to be able to describe and pick out those notes from your coffee and give it as deep of a description as you can, without judging it. And then later you can get into more esoteric things like there's no wow factor, or the acidity is flat and it just doesn't appeal to you, and things like that. But a lot of serious work happens here before competitions. This is where they decide what's going out. When they're developing new varieties and new flavor profiles, this is where that's done. And so Chai and Jennifer have a very big responsibility for guiding the way the flavors of our coffee evolve. So, as I mentioned, this is a seed to cup tour, and I want you to see some baby coffee seeds. We place the dried coffee seed in these trays, and they start to sprout. And you see that the roots will form first, and it'll push that seed upward. And over time, that dry seed husk will dry out, and the leaves will butterfly from inside. And that's how a coffee is born. Hopefully you're old enough to know where coffee babies come from. But we're not done. And the reason is, in the late 90s, our owner, Tom Greenwell, talks about watching random coffee trees die on the farm. Couldn't explain it. They tried all sorts of remedies and nothing seemed to work, to the point where, upon doing soil samples, they found a little worm called a nematode that was attacking the roots of the Arabica trees. And so they decided their way forward was to graft. And that means combining two different varieties of coffee into one to make a sturdy, hardy rootstock, making delicious coffee. So let me show you how that works. Come on this way. So this literally is a brand new graft, and we have 20 to 40,000 grafted coffee babies in our nursery at any given time. Now there's several different options you can use for the rootstock, but for today's, let's talk about Liberica. So there's three main branches of the coffee family. There's Liberica, Arabica, and Robusta. And of the three, the one you probably never heard of is Liberica, simply because in the cup, the coffee doesn't taste very good. But the Liberica tree is massive. It's resistant to almost everything that nature throws at coffee. And so from a seed, we start that Liberica to about 4 inches. We clip it. And so now you have the roots in the pot, and that brown stem, hopefully you can see that sticking out. That's the Liberica plant. Then from the family Arabica, and we have over 10 varieties that we grow on this farm, that's grown from a separate seed to a few inches high. It's cut, the rootstock is discarded, and now you have this upper section we call the scion. That's going to be cut like an arrow. It goes into the opening, and it's held with that plastic clip. And if you give that 4 or 5 weeks to set, that will slowly fuse into a single tree. And let me show you what that looks like about 8 months later. So this is that same tree about 6 to 8 months later. And if you look right here, there's a little bulge, and that would be the scar or the healing point of that graft. Now, a lot of people wonder, well, doesn't that make the taste of the coffee on the branches change? And the answer, it does not. The roots are designed to take the nutrients and the moisture from the ground and send it upward. Now, certainly mineral content, pH of the soil will all affect the way the fruit tastes, but that root is sending that upwards, and it stimulates the growth of a flower on the branch that will pollinate into fruit. And so this is not considered a hybrid. This is considered an Arabica coffee tree. A simple way to imagine that is if you were to graft an orange scion onto the rootstock of a lemon tree, which is very commonly done, it does not make your orange tastes like a lemon. It's simply an orange that's being fed by the rootstock of a lemon tree. So I'd like to share with you the cycle of the trees. This is a coffee tree behind me, and it is going to start flowering sometime in December. And the trees will flower 6 to 7 times, 6 to 7 big blooms until the following spring. And you have little tiny white flowers, kind of reminiscent of a jasmine flower, but it's actually a closer relative of the gardenia. And they line the branches all the way down. They're very close together. So the interesting thing is that coffee trees are self-pollinators. So as the wind blows through the tree, you see that natural shaking that occurs. That's enough to kick up a cloud of pollen. They'll swap flowers or positions, and that will become fruit. But that also means that every berry on the branch ripens independently of every other berry. So if you can come in and take a peek at that, that's coffee cherry on the branches. And you'll see there's green, there's red, and there's black all together. The green are underripe, this one is overripe, and these are ripe. And we only want to take the ripe cherry off the tree. So our workers come in and they hand pick that cherry one by one, and they do that every couple weeks. Now this farm is long and skinny. And so at the bottom of the property, you're at about 1,250 feet. And the top of the farm, you're just over 2,800 feet. And so the cycle of picking changes depending on that elevation. We'll start picking down below in mid-July, and that will usually finish, let's say, before Christmas. And we're still picking the top of the farm, March into April, sometimes even later. Now, once you get all that coffee off the tree, which is intense work, it's all done, hand labor, then you're gonna do leaf and soil samples for nutrient deficiencies in some cases, followed by several rounds of fertilizing. That's general fertilizer, that's spot treatments for when you find imbalances, and it's also micronutrients. And then you're going to stump, prune, shape the trees. I'll talk about that in a second here. And then also you're going to spray this fungus called bacillus over the trees. You're going to mist it over the trees several times when the new berries are just forming, and that helps prevent that coffee berry borer, that beetle we talked about, from entering and colonizing the fruit. Now you'll notice that these trees I'm standing next to are a little bit smaller than the ones I was just with, and the reason is that we stump these trees right down to their, right where you see that cut line there. And this is a modified version of what is known as the Beaumont-Fukunaga stumping method. The Beaumont-Fukunaga method was created in the 1950s by the University of Hawaii, and it was a way to prune the trees that created less labor cost and increased the amount of coffee grown on the trees. Now there's a 4-year cycle, there's a 3-year cycle, but we have adopted a 2-year cycle now where 50% of the field is stumped and 50% is productive, and then they switch back and forth. And the amount of coffee made on that second year is about 21 to 23 pounds of cherry per tree, which actually more than makes up for the unproductive half. And I know it sounds crazy, but the reason we have modified this is trouble with that coffee berry borer. It seemed logical that if you take half the trees away to the stump, then there's no food for a year for that beetle, and it's going to decimate their population. So on that second year of grow back, you're not going to be dealing with as much of those coffee berry beetles. And so it seems to work good. We've gotten amazing production off these trees. So 50% productive, 50% non-productive, and still a reduction in labor cost. So we're at the wet mill, and after the coffee is picked, it comes into this facility behind me. It can come in a couple ways. We can pick it from our own farm, but as a coffee mill, we also purchase certified 100% Kona coffee fruit from other farmers. So they can drive it up to a scale there, and we will weigh it, we will inspect it, and we will grade it to its quality, and that farmer gets a check in the mail a week later. And then we start processing it. We process it first through that silver machine on the corner called a color scanner. And what it does, it has computer spectrograph cameras that read the different color profiles on coffee. So those green ones would be underripe, the black ones would be overripe, and these red ones would be ripe. We can't use the green or the overripe, the dark ones. They just don't have any value as coffee. So this machine, as it scans them, shoots puffs of air, knocking them off the belt, In that silver tube, there's an auger, and that's going to carry them to the trailer here. And once that trailer's full, we're going to John Deere it down to the compost pile. These red guys, though, they fall into another belt, and they're taken to the other side of the building where they undergo pulping. Now follow me a little bit this way, and I'll show you what that looks like. Pulping simply means to separate the skin from the seed. And it's done kind of interestingly. There's a drum with little protrusions that put little punctures in that coffee skin. Now I'm going to show you the machine in a second here, but if you can focus in on my hand, it just makes little cuts in the skin like that, and then it forces it through a gap, and then by squeezing it through another set of rollers, you get 2 coffee beans that come out. Now those are covered in a very sticky and gooey fruit mucilage, so we're going to have to ferment these. Now follow me as I'll show you how that works. This machine is our pulper. And so that red cherry feeds into that machine. It goes through those drums. It separates the skin from the seed. The skin's going to go in the back of a big trailer. And at this moment, we're composting that. But it does have value, and we're kind of reassessing how we're going to use that coffee cascara or skin in the future. The seeds will drop down into a bath of water, and they're going to slightly ferment. They're going to soak somewhere between 16 and 36 hours. We're going to change that water out every few hours, and little by little, that mucilage, as the sugars convert to alcohols, gets carried away. And at some point between that time, it's completely gone. And then we're going to call this washed coffee seed, and it's ready for the next stage, which is dry. So this facility behind me is known as the Hoshidana, which is a Japanese word for drying deck. And it was Japanese immigrants in the early 1900s who adapted a system they had for drying fish to coffee. And we've been using it ever since. So 120 years later, use a rolling roof system to dry our coffee. Now go ahead and open that up. Now Santiago's opening this deck. It just pushes, it's on metal wheels and a roller, and that's drying coffee under there. Any sign of rain, they just close the roof over the coffee. Go home at night, slide the roof over the coffee. And there's no pest, no bird, no rat, no mongoose that's interested in eating that coffee, because once the skin and the mucilage are removed, it's undigestible stone fruit. It's just a mouthful of rocks, and so they're not interested in it whatsoever. Thank you very much, appreciate that. Now this coffee you see here is going to generally spend 3 to 6 days on the deck. Now this was just laid out this morning, so it's kind of wet. Oh, I just dropped one. That's like $6 of coffee. Let me get it. But they're going to spend an average of 3 to 6 days in the Hawaiian sun. You see those beautiful lines on the deck? Every 30 minutes or so, they're going to come by and rake through that coffee, and that'll keep it turned over. And they're going to measure moisture content by weight. So they'll put some of that in a container with a predetermined volume, and they'll weigh it, and they know at different weight parameters the moisture content is approaching the desired level. Now there's a modern twist to this, and that is that down below we have propane-powered drum dryers. Let's go check those out. So the modern twist that I was talking about are these drum dryers, and they can hold our biggest one 15,000 pounds of coffee, and we want to reduce that by 89.5% of its moisture, so down to 10.5%. Now it used to be thought that sun drying your coffee was the best way to go, but they found over the years that for high quality coffee, having these dryers gives you much more control over the dehydration process. That's very important. If you have them sitting on the decks for 3 days or 6 days, sometimes the weather changes, and sometimes it's cooler, and sometimes it sprinkles and they have to cover it, and all those things change the timeline with which that coffee reduces its moisture. The dryers are extremely consistent, very accurate in their perception of the moisture content. And so usually they'll lay them up on the drying decks you saw earlier, get them dried to a certain stage and get a certain amount, because you do have to put a certain amount in the dryers at once, and then you're going to rotate it there 40 to 42 hours with the temperature between 80 and 105 degrees on the drum, but not letting that seed inside getting more than about 96 degrees. And this gives you a very consistent, very clean, very beautiful, high quality dried coffee parchment. Now after the coffee comes off the drying deck, we're going to dry it to about 10.5% moisture. Could be the deck or it could be the dryer. But we're going to put it in these super sack bags. We're going to rest it here in the warehouse somewhere between 30 and 45 days. It's a process called reposing, and allows two important things. One is that the moisture that's in that seed, that 10.5%, has a chance to evenly disperse throughout the seed. That's going to make a better roast later on. Second is that by resting that coffee, it mellows out some of the grassier notes, and eventually that coffee is going to taste a little bit better if you just let it mellow here. 30 to 45 days. And in the peak of harvest, when we're really humming, this warehouse is just chock full of what we call coffee parchment. So we're in what we call the dry mill. And after that coffee is rested for its 30 to 45 days, it comes here for what we call dry processing. Now in my hand, I have what we call coffee parchment, and that is what comes off the drying deck and is rested. But what happens is we need to clean 2 additional layers of skin off that. Now watch my hand carefully. If I squeeze that between my fingers, a green bean emerges. And that green bean, if you look very carefully, has a secondary layer of skin called silver skin. So this big machine behind me is known as the huller and the polisher. And as we feed coffee into the well, it's lifted in a bucket elevator, dropped through this tube, and this little cylinder here, I like to think of it as a glorified rock tumbler. It has conical teeth and it's rotating, and what it does is it rips away that parchment and it partially polishes away some of that silver skin. Now, if you're an engineer and it's going to keep you up at night, I do want you to know that our second machine is dedicated to taking all that debris and blowing it outside. Okay, so rest assured, the debris is not backing up, it's sent outside. And then that coffee is fed into this machine, which is called a screen sorter. Now, if you can get over and look from the top, you have metal screens with holes, and every time you go down a layer, the holes get a little bit smaller. The machine is vibrating quite violently, and the screens are not flat, they're at an angle. What that means, if the bean is too big to go through the opening, it's going to vibrate to the bottom of the pan, it'll fall through a chute, and we can catch it here on this side. Now we're going to break that coffee down into 6 general size categories. In Hawaii, Kona coffee is a little bit special, and we refer to those categories as extra fancy, fancy, number 1, select, peaberry, and prime, and that's after they're inspected. But in addition to size, each of those categories has what's known as an allowable defect rate. And I want you to think about defect in coffee the way you would think about singers in a chorus. Now, bear with me here. If you had a 100-member chorus and 99 of you were singing a beautiful note and only 1 of you was singing off key, you could cover that. It would sound okay. But if you had 85 good singers and 15 off-key singers, you're definitely going to notice that. And that's what defects in coffee are like. In that highest category of extra fancy, you have under 1% defect, and you're going to get beautiful, harmonious flavor notes roasting together. In our prime category, certainly it's still delicious and still good, but you're going to have more of the pull-aways from your central roast to the bitter, to the sour, and they're going to give a little bit of discordance to that overall roast. Now, we got to remove those defects, and the way we're going to do that is a couple. One is a gravity table. This is a density sorter or a gravity table. That beetle we talked about earlier, it literally hollows out the inside of the coffee seed in order to have offspring. And so when you drop it on this vibrating plane, the lighter, less dense seed moves at a faster rate to the lower corner, and I can take a lot of bug damage off that way. And then finally, we have our Buehler Sortex. This is an optical sorter. This is about a $140,000 supercomputer. And what happens is, from this big vat onto a belt, it drops the coffee into the top over there, and it hits a slide. And the slide keeps that coffee in a nice uniform sheet. And it's read by 2 cameras that read defects that we've literally taught the machine to recognize. So we create a database, we create photos of all the coffee we think are defective, and we teach the machine to kick those out. As they go down the slide, there's a gap between this part of the slide and this part. And as they slide in front of that and jump the gap, little air jets will target those defective coffees. So they, and literally they get kicked out of the stream. So you collect your good coffee in one bin and your rejects in another bin. Now, some of those rejects can be usable and some not. It really depends on the grade of coffee you're doing, how many times you're running through the machine, and those other factors. Now, follow me and I'll show you the last part. Now, after all the processes that I've just described to you, the coffee is staged here in the warehouse, which is slightly environmentally controlled. This is still green, unroasted coffee, but on this farm, because we're a mill and because we process, a quarter or so of all Kona coffee grown, the main supply of our coffee is sold unroasted by contract, various medium and small roasters. And so this coffee has to be inspected, and that's what you see here on the tag. That's the State of Hawaii Department of Agriculture's coffee program, and they're going to certify this by its category, its size and defect rate. And once it's certified, we're going to load these bags onto shipping containers, and we're going to send them to the port of Oakland, California. And from there, by contract, that goes out to feed all the various companies who have contracted for this coffee. The 10%-ish that we don't send away is kept on the farm, and we roast that here on site. We roast for our farm every Tuesday and Friday. That's what feeds our gift shop, it feeds our website sales, and it feeds our Amazon store. And that's it. That's the whole coffee supply. Several of our varieties we actually run out of. And so there's certain coffees we have only for a couple months, and then they're gone, and we have to wait for the following year. And it's a repeating theme in Kona coffee is the demand far, far, far exceeds the supply. And it's one of the reasons that Kona coffee is expensive. It's a rare coffee. The other, of course, is that labor cost that we talked about earlier in the field. Now let's go see how they roast this. Now at last, we're at the roasting room. It's a little bit noisy because this is a 100-pound Dietrich drum roaster. We have one batch in the pan cooling, and we have one batch cooking right now. Now, Alex, what are you cooking today? We're doing a full city roast, and he's going to drop that at 414 degrees. So that's our thermometer up there at the top, and he's going to monitor that roast very carefully and make sure he has a steady rate of rise. We use about an 18-minute timeline on this roaster and try to make sure that at the end of that 18 minutes, we're at the desired temperature, whether it's a medium, whether it's full city, or whether it's dark. We have a 100-pound roaster, 25-pound roaster, and a 5-pound roaster here in the corner. Now this is that green processed coffee that I told you we're processing down at the dry mill, and this gets sent up to the roaster here. And we give them orders based on our sales and what's coming in. They cook that to custom order. After they cook that coffee, they're going to release it, come on over, into food grade buckets. That coffee is then going to be given off to the bagging team. And what she's doing here is she has coffee in the foam. She sets her weight parameter on that machine. She holds the bag to the chute, steps on a pedal, it drops just that much in, then holds that bag up to the heat sealer, and literally one by one, a bag of coffee is created. Ooh, that's a berry. That's one of my favorites. Now, if you've ever wondered about flavored coffee, you use this plastic cement mixer-like thing. It does rotate. You put the roasted coffee in there, whole bean or ground. We add a syrup to it with extracted oils for aroma. That coats the bean, and then you have your flavored coffee. So just understand that even though we're like to think of ourselves as a larger operation, in the big scheme of things, Kona Coffee is tiny. And so this is enough for us to service not only our farm, but many, many, many other farms in the Kona Coffee Belt. Now I want you to remember that roasting is both an art and a science. Certainly you're going to use mathematical formulas on your rate of rise to make sure you have a steady increase in that heat to your target temperature. But when we bring our coffee in, for example, it's very consistent at 10.5% moisture. But if we're roasting for other farms, their moisture content might be a little bit above that. And so the roaster's going to have to take that into consideration. A medium roast or a medium dark roast is not a dot on the time temperature line. It's a parameter. And so we drop our medium somewhere around 395. Many farms drop their medium at 410 or 415. And so there's wide variance, and these roasters are a type of chef. In addition to having the science of that cooking down, they have to make micro decisions in the moment to make sure they're adjusting that cook in the proper way, making sure they understand what the other customers, our clients of the farm, want in their roast. And so that's a lot here at the roaster that they do. Before Christmas, on their busiest days, they'll be doing 12 or 1,300 pounds of coffee roasting every single day. That's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. One batch cooking, one cooling, one in the chamber, ready to go. And it can be quite intense. But a good roaster can totally elevate your coffee to new dimensions. And a bad roaster can take a decent coffee and make it flat and unappealing. So it's a vital step in creating those beautiful flavor notes in your Kona coffee. Awesome. So I have a special guest with me today. This is Tom Greenwell. He is the owner and the fourth generation great-grandson of our founder, Henry. How's it going today, Tom?
Very good.
So when was it that you guys got out of ranching and went into coffee as your main deal?
Officially 1985.
85. Yeah. And what was it that brought you into the Kona coffee world in such a deep and meaningful way?
Well, basically my dad wanted to be a farmer. As soon as he chose coffee as the crop he wanted to farm, we started diving into our history and found that we were very much connected in the coffee industry from the 1860s.
Right. That's amazing. Now, I was told that when your dad said they were going into coffee, you were in school and you're getting diesel engineering degree, and you weren't really into farming at that moment, but certainly you learned it well, right?
Well, sometimes you're forced in. Yeah, it was not what I expected to be doing the rest of my life.
I see.
There was a lot of convincing going on from my father's point of view to me, and I took the mechanical side of coffee farming, and that kind of what drove me into becoming my passion.
I see. Interesting. Now, over the years, you've been doing it, what, for almost 40 years now. What have been the ups and downs or the biggest challenges that you faced?
I would say probably the biggest challenge has been the new invasive species. That have been, anytime you monocrop anything, you have problems.
I see.
But invasive species such as coffee berry borer, coffee leaf rust now, just a lot of new pests are just coming in daily.
So that ends up being more work, more money for less coffee, and it's just a constant battle to get through it.
Yeah, every pest or every challenge, costs you money, right? More labor in the field. Speaking of labor is probably one of our largest challenges.
I see. Yeah. Certainly, hand-picking all that coffee. Yeah.
Hand-picking, and now we have to go out there, and fortunately we have a lot of organic products that we can use in the field, but you got to stay on top of it, because you can't let your problem get, you can't let it overwhelm the farm.
Right, right. Now, I know you are committed to protecting the Kona, 100% Kona brand name as a brand name, we talked about that before, but can I ask you, how do you see the next 10, 20, 50 years of the Kona coffee industry kind of forming or unfolding?
Well, because it's getting harder to farm, and being that most of the farms in Kona are, primarily hand labor, it's becoming more expensive to hand labor, becoming more expensive to farm because of the hand labor. And I see it more going, it used to be Kona was dependent on the blend market, to sell the crop. And I've always, promoted that because a farmer needs to sell his crop. If he doesn't sell his crop, he's not going to make money. Well, today, the 100% Kona coffee has really taken a place in the 100% now, because we have more people drinking specialty coffees. Kona is one of the best, if not the best. I say that with it, but I mean it.
Yeah, one of the top 5 coffees in the world for sure.
And I don't think we're going to have enough coffee for the 100% market eventually.
I see.
Real estate's taking over, more houses, less farms. So just the total production will drop.
I see. Now, one of the things that I've always admired about you, Tom, and it's a thing that's a theme of our festival here as well, is that you've always looked at the other farms in Kona not as competition, but as partners to protect the brand. And you've done a lot of education, outreach, getting product out there to those farmers. How did you come to that approach in your mind?
You know, at first, everybody looks at their neighbor as a the competitor.
Right.
We're a drop in the bucket in the world in the coffee industry. And if we bind together as an industry, working together, we'll be able to overcome these bigger obstacles. As long as everybody sells good, high quality Kona coffee, we don't compete, we enhance each other.
I see.
We all have a little different taste,
Sure.
from processing, location, microclimate, variety. So it's fun. It's kind of like the wine industry. How does Napa survive, right? It's because they work together, not because they all compete against each other.
I see. Amazing. Well, Tom, I'm so glad I had a moment to chat with you. Thank you so much for all you do for the Kona coffee world. And Tom Greenwell, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, now we're finally down to everybody's favorite part. Now I'm going to teach you how to make the perfect, delicious cup of coffee. Now there's many ways to make your coffee. You can use drip makers and Chemex pour-overs and mocha pots and aero pots, but today we're going to look at the French press, which always makes a lovely coffee and helps to reveal some of those more fine notes in Kona coffee. Now we're using today our Elizabeth J coffee. This comes from a variety called Pacamara. It's very fruity, almost tea. It's a medium roast, and I just fresh grounded it. So I have this kind of a medium grind here. I just ground it a second ago, and I'm gonna put a 16-to-1 ratio. So I have 20 grams of coffee to 320 grams of water. And that's gonna go right into the bottom of the French press. Now I've heated my water to 205 degrees, and there's some steps that I'm going to take.
Yeah, no, you can't. Well,
First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that water and I'm just going to wet those grounds. So I'm going to put about an inch of water on top of them and just let it sit there for a second. And I'm going to create that bloom. I'm going to let that water kind of work its way into the nooks and crannies of the coffee. Let it kind of lift it up and give it a chance for the water to work in the pores. After about 30 seconds, I'm going to do a quick degassing. So I'm going to put little concentric rings around the center of that, let the carbon dioxide kind of bubble away, and then I'll fill it up and let it sit for the rest of that 4 minutes. So if you can get in there, I want you to watch this. If you can come right over the top, watch these white bubbles form as I put that in. That's the carbon dioxide gas, and this is called degassing. I'm going to let that sit there for just a sec, and let that air that carbon dioxide kind of work its way out. And then we're gonna fill it up to the top.
so went in, had it.
Nice and slow. I just wanna make sure all the grounds are wet. Any crust that's on top gets hit. I don't need to stir this. I don't need to agitate it. I'm gonna let the hot water do all of the work. So, about 4 minutes have gone by, and I'm gonna take off that top. I haven't pressed it yet, and I'm just going to very lightly knock back any of the crust that's sitting on top. So I'm not going to stir it, I'm not going to agitate. I just want those floaters on top to have a chance to settle down. And then I'm going to put this back on top, push it in just like a half an inch, and let that sit for another minute. Now some people will tell you 2 minutes. It's up to you. You can experiment. But after I let that sit another full minute, I'm going to press it. The important thing is I don't want to press it all the way to the bottom. I don't want to disturb those grounds that have settled, because the coffee will tend to over extract. So I'm watching my clock. I'm coming up on that final minute here, and I'm just going to very slowly push my press down, and I'm going to stop it right about an inch above where the grounds are at the bottom. Then I'm going to put my finger on the lid and pour it into the cup. This should be a beautiful, gorgeous, elegant cup of coffee. Now, how would you like to sample a very unique cup of coffee? Come on over. Yeah, don't be shy. You're going to be famous and everything. This is called Elizabeth J. And that comes from this French press. I want you to hear your reaction on it. Give it a nice slurp.
It's awesome.
Very fruity, very light.
You don't need any cream or sugar.
No cream or sugar, very smooth. Anybody else want to try this Elizabeth J? Just French pressed it? You can be famous. Come on over. We just did a 4-minute French press on that, and that's this one we call Elizabeth J. It's very fruity and light. Let's see your reaction to it.
It is fruity and like no, but like it actually.
Are you a professional actress? It is fruity. Oh my god.
But it is. I just had the espresso blend, so it's like
Yeah,
very
very fruity. Yeah. I have one more if anybody wants to try. You want to try this, sir? This is our Elizabeth J. Very light and fruity and delicate medium roasted Kona coffee.
Yeah. It was nice when he was,
It's nice, yeah. A lot of peach and cherry and apricot tucked in there on the center of the palate.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
Thank you very
Really good,
much.
thank you.
So there you have it. The proof is in the reaction of our beautiful customers here, and that's just the way it's done. You take your time, you control the variables, and you make sure you're extracting all the beautiful goodness of that coffee. Now guys, thank you so much for watching our video today on behalf of Greenwell Farms and the Kona Coffee Cultural Festival. We hope you have nothing but beautiful coffee in your life. Aloha.